Hi everyone, welcome to the fourth episode of Lockdown Conversations with me, Unmir Said. This episode is very special for me because since the time I entered into B2B space in marketing, I've looked up to this woman. She's been one of the first ones to introduce thought leadership and brand building, and she's been one of the first CMOs as well of the IT companies that we have in the Indian context. She's the winner of several prestigious marketing awards and with more than 2 decades of experience in this space. Welcome to the show, CEO of Paul Writer, Jesse Paul. Welcome, Jesse.
Thanks so much for that introduction, and thanks so much for having me here, Kunmir. And it's very gracious introduction. So let's hope that I can live up to it
No, no.
and add value to everybody this year.
Clearly you've been dominating the B2B space for the last 10 odd years for sure. I think everybody out there who's done IT marketing knows that. So the first
Hmm.
question, so where did it all start for you? So what was the first starting point? So because I read something about you started with advertising. So from advertising, how did it all move about for you?
So I wanted to be in advertising because I feel it gives you like all-rounded view of marketing.
Right.
So straight from my MBA, I wanted to spend a few years in advertising, and so I actually gave up my campus placement so that I could get that experience. And that
Wow.
was actually a very exciting experience because I had to go door to door,
And this was
and the
IAM,
agents,
right? IAM.
yeah, but
Wow.
nobody wanted an IM person in advertising,
Okay, but
right?
interesting
So
story from an IAM to an ad agency as the first job.
yeah, so it was very popular, I think, in the 80s, and then by the 90s, it had lost its glamour. So I
Okay.
actually went door to door on MG Road, knocking on doors, saying, "Can I please have an interview at least?" And most of them were like, "No, because you will leave, you're too fancy for this place." So I actually had to find a contact who was also from an IIM in Ogilvy, and finally they said, "Okay, fine, you can come."
Okay.
And that was really at half the salary of my campus offer.
Okay.
So pretty, yeah, it was a big commitment at the time. And I really wanted to do it, right?
Right.
So 3 years in advertising was fantastic, but then, I wanted to do something a little different, and also get a little bit more money, of course.
Hmm.
Um, so at the time, I remember that I had three job offers. So again, I did cold calling and so on. And I had offers from Wipro, Infosys, and hotline paging because people of your generation may not even remember, but pagers were really popular at one time.
Okay. Okay.
But by sheer luck, I joined Infosys. And that was actually a great fit because I also had a degree in computer science
Hmm.
and I had this marketing background, and they were just really embarking on their marketing journey.
Right.
So it was actually a phenomenal time.
Wow.
And when I joined, they were at like 60 million.
Hmm.
And marketing, like, we were building the first website, we were doing the first brochures, the first
Oh, it was
events.
from that time. So basically.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, so actually when I joined, I saw Mr. Murthy one day working late,
Okay.
and I was like, "So what are you doing? Can I help you?" And he said, "No, I'm replying to all the media queries." I'm like, "You write every answer yourself?" "Yes, of course, that's how we do it." "You don't
Interesting.
have a PR agency?" Yeah, they send out the answers.
So interesting. Interesting.
Right?
From
So
there, I mean that's
yeah, so there was a very interesting and exciting period, and you could do pretty much everything, and you could experiment a lot, and I'm really glad to have had that opportunity.
hmm
So that's how I got into B2B, and we'll come to that in your later questions.
Yeah.
But it was a fairly big jump because in Ogilvy I was handling RPG Cellular, was my biggest brand,
Okay.
and that was all outdoor and
hmm
hoardings and so on. And I also had Kumudam, the Tamil magazine.
hmm
I did some Bharat Petroleum. It was a very eclectic and B2C brands.
Right.
And the only claim I have is that I was also doing Cognizant at the time of its brand name change.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So that was the only thing which was somewhat relevant to Infosys.
Right. Right.
Um, So it was a big shift to B2B, but it was really exciting. So, you do have a question on, is B2B exciting? And we'll cover that.
Yeah.
But
That question is coming.
it was exciting, right?
Okay.
Because you're building something, you're growing something, so
Right.
there is a different flavor to that.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, the kind of canvas that I had in Infosys would have been very hard to find in any agency. I mean, literally, we were late for some event, and someone actually flew into US to hand over the stuff.
Wow. Okay.
So you had that kind of money, and when you're doing a brochure, Mr. Murthy wanted WYSIWYG, which in those days was really tough. I mean, digital
Right.
printer of that quality.
Right.
So we used to get it from Chennai. Someone would go there, bring it.
Wow. And those are the times when IT was also in its peak, right? So I think the boom was just right there.
We were at 70%, 80% profit, 100% growth. So, it was a very different timeline.
Right.
So I think that's where, B2B kind of entered my blood, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in B2B for the next 13 years in the IT industry. So that's really the chunk of my experience.
Wow. Amazing, Jessie. I think this journey from advertising to B2B, I think not many people kind of do that, I think. And you were the very first ones to kind of do that.
No, I pulled people from Ogilvy also along. So some of my colleagues are also ex-Ogilvy.
Okay. And from advertising, how did Paul Writer happen? From your B2B stint, how did kind of Paul Writer happen? And how did you think of starting something in 2010, which was, I think back then, not many of these startups were around.
Right. So I had very inspirational bosses, and one of them told me that, when you look at a promotion or a new job, you have to see whether it helps you to control more of your destiny.
Okay.
So he said, you can't just look at the title or the salary or even the budget that you're managing if you don't have the authority to spend the budget without some 10 approvals, if you can't go home early without some 10 approvals, if you can't, say travel budget, you can't manage without some 10 approvals, your campaign, anything, if you need 10 approvals, then that is not a step up. More and more, you should control your own destiny was really the thinking. And that actually was very influential. And obviously, the higher you go or the more specialized you become, the more control you have over your destiny.
Yeah.
Now, so that planted the idea in my head that, it's nice to have that kind of a position. And that essentially you would get that if you were CEO. Now, from marketing to IT CEO, very unlikely. Very few have achieved it. Only one really comes to mind, which is Ram Kumar from Cognizant, who is now MD.
Okay.
But even he was more strategy and marketing, not plain marketing. But that's like, 1-2 people who have actually made that transition.
Right.
And the reason is simple, because you're not in the core operations, and IT B2B operations is very, very different from B2B marketing.
Right.
Right. So my choices were really that I was 40. I'd been, CMO of a Fortune 1000 company from 35. So my opportunities really, and there were a few, were either like, CMO of another global organization, maybe a big organization, but it's still the same role. It's a CMO role.
Right.
Or I would have to go back into advertising, which is where marketing is like a core kind of a thing.
Right. Which many people also kind of do from back.
Yeah, which you do. Correct. Except that if you look at B2B compensation and then you look at advertising compensation, there's a stark difference.
Yeah.
Right? So I actually went back to my old boss in Ogilvy and said, boss, can you do something? I'd like to explore. And he was like, Jessie, I've just seen your compensation. You can forget it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's insulting for me to even share this with people.
No, Jessie, I can imagine from a CMO to even the top heads of ad agencies now. I think there's a stark difference for sure.
Yeah, and it's also because the boom days of the agencies, also when they were giving out ESOPs and all, had kind of passed by then. So rather than go there and struggle with this new canvas and constraints, because again if you're coming from the boom era of IT, things were very lavish actually at one point.
Right.
Even though we're very careful companies, so Infosys, Wipro, they were very, very careful on money. But still, the kind of scope that you had with $1 billion in revenue and 30% margins, and they were very, very conjuice, I would say, on marketing spend. But it's still a lot more, let's say, flexibility that you had than in a 5% margin kind of an industry. So thinking that over, I felt, and also like you pointed out, hardly anyone was there in the B2B space.
Yeah.
We were working with agencies and so on, but most had just started actually having like a B2B practice.
Right.
And especially two things. One is content was a struggle. That is US quality and language and all of that.
Right.
The second area which I felt and I still feel a lot of companies struggle with is positioning. So the philosophy really is that, look, I mean, you can do a great job of communication, but if your underlying message is incorrect, then that communication is of no good.
Right. Right.
Right. I mean, if I'm white and I've told you that I'm pink, then there's of no value to you. So, and that actually was, and still is in my view, a problem that many of us just continue to do whatever is working. And as long as you're having growth, you don't question what is it that the customer is buying.
Yeah.
So you may be selling innovation and the customer may be buying price. And that will eventually lead you to a trouble point because you think he's buying your innovation and you can increase your price. But he all this while has never heard the word innovation from you. So the moment you spike your price, he's like, well, I don't know. I mean, you're my lowest cost player and that's why I chose you. Right. So my initial promise really was to fix that.
Okay.
So I started with pure consulting where basically go in, look at their value proposition, and then streamline their marketing plan and leave it at that point. So that's how I started. But then there was a lot of interest in what do you do next? I mean, you've given us this great plan.
Right.
Aren't you going to handhold us to execute it or at least manage it? Right. So we had both. Program management was actually a piece that evolved from client request. So where you have multiple agencies to execute the plan,
right.
Paul Reiter would be the program management office, which is very common in IT, but not so common in marketing.
Right, right.
Right. So we just made sure that everybody was delivering as per the SLAs. And then from there, where there was a white space, so your existing agencies could not or would not want to do a certain piece of business, that is where Paul Reiter would offer its own services. So it was a mix of program management and offering our own services. And then, after some time, it became we could also do standalone delivery of services and so on.
Right.
So that's really the story behind why Paul Reiter. And then events was actually added on more because I really enjoyed doing events. But then that also became a very popular part of our portfolio.
Right. Yeah, I clearly remember that in 2010,
yeah.
12.
Yeah, so that's really kind of the evolution. And B2B was only because from a positioning perspective, almost everybody else was entering the B2C space.
Yeah.
So it made sense to stick to B2B, even though, frankly, B2B and B2C are not that different.
Right, right. But even now, Jesse, we see a lot of the agencies, the bigger ones especially, they still don't really have a specialized wing or a unit for handling B2B clients, right? So, and then that's something that's still there. I think the void is still there, where a lot of the bigger IT companies still go with bigger names, but they still do not really have a specialized unit to handle B2B comms.
Actually, in my experience, a lot of the IT firms work with specialized players.
Right.
So they may work with a large firm for a specific video or like the more B2C-ish flavor elements. But most of their stuff goes to specialized events firms, specialized PR firms, specialized content firms. And the larger agencies that have been successful are the ones that have a separate division just to run that.
Yeah.
So one
Yeah.
of the first was, I think, Ogilvy itself, where
Mm.
they set up a separate BPO type thing to run IBM's content.
Right.
That works,
Mm.
right? And
Right.
you have to do that because the rhythm is different, the expectations are different,
Yeah.
and the people you need. I mean, a good copywriter is going to cry if you make him write a IT web
Yeah. The
page.
long form copy. That kind of.
Yeah, it's not just long form, it's also highly technical, and you
Right.
have to understand what is this fellow selling.
Yeah.
And it's really easier to come to speed with a B2C product or service because essentially it is meant for consumption for someone like you.
Mm.
The trouble with B2B is essentially you are not the target audience ever.
Right.
So, you have to go through not just the technical bits, but try to put yourself in the mind of a consumer
Mm.
who is not like anyone you know. So you rely a lot on research, you rely a lot on, what the sales guy from the market says is what they want.
Mm.
And because the other additional complication for Indian firms is that the B2B clients typically have a global footprint.
Mm. Mm.
So I want my stuff to appeal to UK, US, whatever,
Right.
and
The client is there.
um,
Yeah. Mm.
the client is there.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting, in Bangalore or wherever. I have to understand that language, the way they talk, the way they think.
Mm.
So you would be told to, write about bread shortage in Sainsbury's, UK. Um, it's a little hard for you to do that sitting out of Bangalore,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you can do it. It's not that
Mm.
you can't. And this is one of the battles we fought for years, saying that
Yeah.
you can sit anywhere and do it. I mean, a
True.
Netflix content is centralized somewhere, and yet it has viewers across the world.
True.
But it's a question of understanding the market and getting that insight.
Mm.
And investing in that is a fairly big play, and that is why not everyone wants to do it. And the other thing is, at least till very recently, the B2C market is much, much larger than B2B.
Mm. Mm.
So, if I mean a typical campaign from one B2C, if you're able to catch, if you're getting even a tiny bit of it,
Mm.
that's worth a great deal more than a content contract.
Right. 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 Absolutely. So this brings me to my next question. So many people describe B2B communication as a tad bit boring. It's full of emailers, white papers, webinars, and all of that. So what do you think has changed in the last few years as you've seen B2B comms from way back then, and what do you think has changed now?
See, the main difference has been brought about because of digital. And that means that the way customers buy has changed dramatically.
Mm.
I would say that the way companies
And
sell
I
hasn't
must
changed as
add
much.
that you were the first ones to introduce the thought leadership concept because it wasn't
Mhm.
really existing back then, right? So thought leadership as a practice now is pretty common, but back then I think wasn't really into existence as well. So that was
It
something.
was in the US. It
Yeah,
was in the US.
right.
So a lot of what Infosys did was modeled on what was required by the market. And so things like analyst relations. I mean, very honestly, when the head of sales for Infosys said, "Oh, we should target Gartner,"
Mhm.
our response was, "So what's Gartner?" What's an analyst? Right?
Right,
Because in India we'd never seen these creatures, it didn't exist.
right.
um, so our first visit to the US was, I think, 99. And
Okay.
we actually had, so this was Fanish who used to head sales and marketing, and he actually had taken, I think, 4 of us to the US because he said you can't sell if you don't know these things.
Right.
And so we went to meet Gartner, and we were actually the first Indians they had met also.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, so it was like so nice. I mean, you guys have come from India, and I still remember there was an analyst called Ali Young, and she brought us maple syrup, saying this is traditional here. And it was really a meeting of cultures because this
Yeah.
was the internet was there, but it wasn't the way it is today.
Yeah. 99.
So you wouldn't, yeah, you can't find every answer out there like you can now.
Yeah. Yeah. True. True.
So thought leadership, yes, it's there. And see, all of it is really around the B2B buyer's request or requirement. And
Mhm.
that hasn't changed that much. So like I have this chart which shows you what do people want at various stages of the buying journey.
Right.
Now, in B2C, it's pretty simple. It's awareness, interest, desire, and action.
Yeah.
Um, in B2B, because each transaction is so much bigger and longer, and because in many cases you can't see the product until you actually buy it,
Mm-hmm.
there is a whole, splicing of that piece.
Right.
So first is, are you in the consideration set? Then I want to do an analysis across you. Then I want to see prior experience in the space. I want to talk to references. There's a whole bunch of things.
Mm.
And when you try to shortcut that, it doesn't work. So,
Yeah.
for example, if you see today, there's a lot of, unhappiness with the whole PPE purchasing cycle. People are, and I mean, people as in like big governments are actually buying tons of masks and then discovering that, well, it doesn't actually suit them, or like the UK government bought COVID tests and it didn't work as per what they thought it should. And all of this is because you try to shortcut the B2B cycle. In the normal case, you would have asked for references, you would have asked for a trial piece, you would have asked for previous experiences. Right. Now, because you're desperate, you've cut short all of that. But all those stages are there for a reason. And you have to address each of those stages. And that cannot be shortcutted. I mean, you can do it digitally, but you can't skip those pieces.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And it's very similar to the same situation where, okay, you're asking for 100 million and I've never done 100 million masks before. You'll have to trust me when I show you that I have factory capacity or I've got certifications or the right people.
Right.
So you go with proxies. And that is a large part of B2B marketing where until you place your order, I cannot show you the bridge that is going to be built or the building. Right. Or the IT software or any of those things. Or like if you're buying a SaaS product, you would want to know that I'll be in existence 2 years down the line and you don't have to migrate everything. So the purpose of B2B marketing is actually to build trust that I can deliver what I have promised.
Okay.
So that's a big difference. And you say it's a lot of emailers and webinars and all of that. But that's because I'm trying to educate you on this large complex piece. And the shift, however, and people are still stuck in the old world. And, actually this lockdown is going to change some of that, is the understanding that you can move a lot of it to on demand.
Okay.
Right. A guy who's doing $100 million contract wants this information.
Right.
So just unnecessarily, sending him mail after mail is of no use. Better to tell him that when you want it, I have all of this available to you. And change the mindset, which today is that I don't want to close the deal digitally. Most of our websites are engineered that you can't close a deal online.
Right.
It'll be called sales to no more.
Yeah, that's typical. Yeah.
Right? Or even if it's like a SaaS product, it'll be if you're 1 to 10 users, here's your price. If you're 10 to 100 users, here's your price.
So maximum like an ROI calculator, which is probably in there.
Why don't you just tell me? Why can't I just work it out and say, okay, if I have 1,000 employees, this is the cost you're willing to give me.
Right.
And you can immediately have a live chat session. All of that you can do. But why this old-fashioned process of please fill in a form and we will come back to you?
So you think that's going to change now with the current scenario?
It should, because you have to rethink sales, because at least for the foreseeable future, nobody wants to really hop on a plane and go and meet people. And even if you are willing to hop on a plane and meet people, your client may not want to meet you.
Right.
And over the last 3 months, we've kind of got comfortable with doing a lot of stuff online. And so first of all, but the thing is, the temptation is, oh, okay, I used to do face-to-face these things, so now I can do it on Zoom. But that's really not the best way to exploit the potential.
Right.
For example, a lot of people are rushing in to do webinars because their other events have gone off. I want to do webinars.
Right.
Now, if you've gone on a webinar, you understand that the interaction is pretty low. Right. So 200 attendees, maybe, I can answer maybe 10 of you, even if I'm a very interactive webinar.
Yeah.
panelists have 1 hour, they're not going to answer everybody. So they have 45. So, typical webinar of 1 hour. There'll be some sponsor content, some introduction.
Yeah.
So let's say 15 minutes is gone there.
Yeah.
So 40 minutes for my panelists, each of whom will then get maybe 8 minutes, and then 15 minutes for Q&A. But I
Right.
have 200 attendees, so how many Q&As can I do? Right? So now you've joined in because you think these guys are awesome, but you're not getting to interact with them all that much. But if you rethink, why does this have to be in real time? So if I'm coming to a webinar to learn from my experts, I could very well have that recorded and watch it whenever I want. Right? So why this emphasis on get me 200 attendees of this webinar today and spam the world saying join my webinar, join my webinar. Truly, if your content is good, I will actually come to your archives and look for it.
Right.
And you could, in fact, send me a weekly compilation saying, here are all the great ideas I've had. Take a look. And if you're a valuable enough customer, and in B2B, most customers are very valuable, how about I set up a special interaction for you with this person?
Like a one-on-one kind of.
Correct, one-on-one, or maybe, 10 of you join together, whatever. But that's actually taking digital medium the way it is meant to be used. But we are just going back to the old appointment setting, let's watch TV at this time. Right? So you have the opportunity to be Netflix, but you essentially are going back to good old BBC.
Right. No, very interesting. I think is Paul Reiter also incorporating some of these suggestions, and I mean in terms of also advising the clientele that they have, and as the model also kind of.
So advising, definitely yes, and recently actually a lot of the sessions are informal advice sessions of what to do now.
Right.
Because see, the reaction, everybody wants action right now. So let's do something. Kuch to karo, kuch to karo. Oh, mailers, newsletters, let's get them out. But I think after a month, many people have realized that this is helping with visibility of themselves and their company. But the clients are like, if you looked at your mailbox, is flooded today. Everybody has one webinar and one newsletter. It's not really working for you. So a lot of it is around what do I do? How can I make this more sustainable for one? Because we now know that it is not a short-term problem. It is going to be a reset of the way we do things. So consulting, yes. In terms of actually doing it, I think since September of last year, we took a call not to do webinars.
Okay.
So the previous year, I think we did 50 or something.
Okay.
And I was frankly feeling burned out, and I had severe issues as to why are we doing these things.
Right.
It was also getting to be a very crowded market, frankly. So I wanted to take a year off because I'm also working on a book, and which is with Bloomsbury, and I'm already behind deadline. So it's coming out in November.
Okay. Is this the best time to write because of the whole lockdown?
Correct. So anyway, it wasn't planned that way, but it has all worked out really well.
Right.
But I wanted to cut down on events for two reasons. One was I wanted to cut down on travel and focus. And the second was I thought that there was a downturn coming up. And typically in a recession, events are the first to get hit. They're your largest expenses.
Yeah, absolutely.
In marketing budget for B2B. So they tend to immediately get hit, or they become very crazy. You have to get me leads out of this particular webinar immediately. They have to buy now. But from a webinar to conversion, it takes a while. It's not like I showed up on a webinar, you can't expect me to buy tomorrow.
Yeah, true.
So, it was going through, I feel there was already a bit of a recession or downturn coming up. So in retrospect, I'm so happy I don't have events running this year, because otherwise I'd be totally sunk.
Right.
Yeah, but because that whole piece is just not coming back in a hurry.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even the webinars today, it's really tough because everybody is trying to do a webinar.
Yeah.
You cannot go with the old model of, one person from my company, 3 clients, and we're done. Um, you have to, because even there, I feel people, and one of the advice that I'm giving people is, in a typical event, you go with proximity. So I have to take a local expert because the cost of flying in someone from elsewhere is pretty steep, not just in terms of money, but in terms of time.
Right.
But now, when I can attend a webinar from anywhere in the world, my expectation is that the world's best are going to be delivered to me.
Right.
So you cannot go with that old excuse of my, VP engineering from India is going to be my speaker. I'm expecting your global head of research to show up. But
Right.
not everyone is thinking that way. So if you see the webinar invitations, they're just taking their old events and converting them to webinar.
Webinars, right.
Right. But I paid for proximity in the sense that I was willing to attend an event or a roundtable in India
Right.
with your Indian expert because it's 20 of us and I can ask him questions, and therefore I came. But when you're repositioning it and saying there'll be 200 people attending this webinar with the same fellow, I'm not getting interaction, nor am I getting great education, because
The
I'm
experience
like, I could
isn't the
have called
same.
this fellow.
Right.
No, I could have spoken to him on the phone, yeah. I mean, why
Yeah.
do I need to do all this?
Yeah. True.
Right?
True.
So I do feel that there is a lot that can be done to improve the quality. I feel some people are doing a great job, but many are just, trying to transform whatever they had to an online format.
Right.
And therefore, I'm extremely happy that, I'm not in events this year, not because I was very farsighted, but,
Right.
because of the chance and the feeling that the market was going a bit down.
Okay. No, that's quite a
And
foresight actually. Like to see that
I just
last
tell
year.
that because, so I started Paul Writer in the midst of a recession. So 2010 was also a bad year
Oh
for
yeah.
B2B.
Right.
2009 was really bad. 2010 was pretty bad, not for the whole country, but only for B2B, IT primarily. And I knew that in that crisis, these are the first things that get chucked out. Right? You want to conserve your funds and you don't want to do these events and things. You want to actually do a lot more of customer mining.
Right.
So the spaces which now have picked up are consulting, definitely, where a lot of people, not the long scale positioning kind of things, but they want quick, one day kind of turnaround. Is this the way to do it? What should I do? Do I reposition? And not just B2B, I've actually done sessions with B2C as well.
Right.
More in terms of thinking of what should I do, where should I go, because I've also been writing about what do you do in a downturn. And not many people in India have actually experience of marketing in a downturn.
Right.
Because we haven't had that many since 92, hardly any.
Right.
So even 2000 was again very IT specific and Bangalore specific. 2008 was financial services and IT, but India was largely shielded. This is the first time we've been caught up in a global disaster.
It'll be interesting to see, like you said, because a lot of companies are sort of introducing interesting formats as well, and at least on the B2C level. So B2B, it'd be sort of nice to see some fresher.
The formats is one part, but it's also that, look, so one of the things we had in Infosys when we were in 99, 2000, when there was the first crash, the dot-com crash. So there was panic all around, and obviously everybody was producing numbers saying we can't grow because, market is down, what are we going to do? And then Mr. Modi was like, but what's our market share actually? And in the global IT pie, Infi was less than 1%. It was like 0.01% types.
Okay.
Because it's a very fragmented market. Even an IBM would have at the time had, 7 to 10% kind of a market share. But so if you look at it that way, his point is, look, I mean, if an Accenture is so huge, it's a billion plus when we are like less than 100 million. We don't have to worry about market becoming smaller, because we could double our revenue by even taking 1.01% of somebody else's market share. Right? So if you're a small player, the solution to your problem is actually to gain market share at somebody else's expense. And you don't target the whole organization. You just need to go after a small niche. Right? So if I'm a toothpaste and I want to, I'm not Colgate, all I need to do is target Colgate and take one tiny slice away from them. And for me, it will be double my growth. And for Colgate, it's a very negligible loss. So they may not even come after me.
Right.
Right. So that's why B2C guys do these small charcoal or Ayurveda,
Yeah.
something that they think Colgate will not fight back, and then you take a tiny chip out of the thing and leave it.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So that works for B2B as well.
Mm.
And more than the formats, like I say, you have to figure out how are you going to manage the contraction,
Mm-hmm.
because whichever numbers you believe, there is going to be a slowdown.
Mm.
Some way more than others. So if you are targeting retail, if you're targeting travel, then your slowdown is significant.
Right.
But even if you are looking at simple FMCG kind of things, which will pick up pretty fast and soon,
Mm-hmm.
or even if you look at entertainment and so on, you're still going to be hit maybe 20% at least.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you have to look at why should someone choose you now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? How do you hang on to your existing clients,
Mm-hmm.
and how do you take away a small slice of
Also.
somebody else's pie,
Right.
so that you remain at least constant
Mm.
despite the shrinking market? And by and large, everybody's market is going to shrink by 20%.
Wow. Yeah.
Because for
Interesting.
2 months you're shut. So, I mean, basic economics is that you will see us. I mean, how much we don't know, but 20% seems to be an easy ballpark.
Right. Yeah, with the numbers coming in of even the layoffs, I think has been kind of crazy, right? So
It will, because you're shrinking, right? I mean, you
yeah.
have no, I mean, no matter how good your company is, if in 2 months you've had no sales, you have a problem.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, so right now consulting is fun, and content is fun. And
Right.
everybody needs more content, because that's the only thing you're relying on today to hang on to your clients.
Right.